This is episode 13 of the Exit Philosophy podcast. He is Richard Griffin. Griff, I'm Scott MacArthur, Scotty Mac, and we are coming to you on the morning of Wednesday, August the 2nd. We've pushed back our usual Monday record date this week so that we can speak about the totality of the trade deadline that has now passed. The work the Blue Jays did, the work the Blue Jays didn't do, and Griff, if you want me to just drill it down in its most simplest form, it seems like the biggest piece of news out of the Blue Jays camp here, in terms of who they acquired and the result of it, is that the number 12 is back in rotation. Jordan Hicks is wearing number 12.
Yeah, that's surprising in a way, even though Roberto Alomar is in disgrace around the Blue Jays camp. I mean, I remember when Edwin Encarnacion was the last number 12, and he gave it up at spring training the year that Robbie was going to the Hall of Fame, was going to be inducted. He gave up number 12, went to number 10. And I don't think it had been in circulation since. I'm not sure. But it is sort of, I mean, the man is separate from what he did on the field, and I believe that his numbers were such, and his accomplishments as a player were such, and his impact on the two World Series were such that the number should be separate and not have been put back into circulation for Jordan Hicks.
Right. Well, I mean, O.J. Simpson is still in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and somebody's going to come back at me and say, well, he was acquitted. Okay, he was acquitted. Tell me what you believe about what went down on that June night almost 30 years ago in Brentwood. Oh, and then, by the way, OJ was later convicted in Nevada of robbery and spent a few years in prison as a result of that conviction.
But it's likely...
My point, Griff, is the Roberto Alomar erasure is now complete. The number 12 is back in circulation with the Blue Jays. This is 13, 14-year-old me saying I have a hesitancy about that because that's the one thing that nobody was really paying attention to. Take Roberto Alomar off the level of excellence, make him persona non grata around the Rogers Center, around the entire franchise, take that youth Tournament 12 and change the name, do all of those things. Nobody was focused on the number. And I think just letting that lie would have been fine. I'm not going to lose sleep over the fact that number 12 is back in circulation, but it you know.
I have a couple of friends who have that same feeling about Alomar's career, who were a similar age in 92, 93. When the Jays were working their magic, and they are pretty upset about the whole, not necessarily the number, but a lot of the treatment and whatever that Robbie got. But we just know that in terms of O.J. Simpson, that his Heisman Trophy is being used as a doorstop by some memorabilia collector who got it at a real cut rate bargain.
And I'm sure the pose, the hand is probably cracked off. That door cracked open a little too quickly sometime. Now the trophy's broken. Hey,
no doubt. You
know, and OJ doesn't have his, nor does Reggie Bush, for different reasons.
Scotty, since we started in on number 12 and Jordan Hicks, what's your overall impression of the trade deadline moves that the Jays made, which really constitute start with Genesis Cabrera or Genesis or Genesis, however we want to pronounce it. I think the Jays broadcasters are saying Genesis, so let's go with that. Cabrera, and then Jordan Hicks, and then Paul DeJong. And both those latter moves, Hicks and DeJong, the shortstop, he came over from the Cardinals, could be seen as a result of injuries, with Jordan Romano going down. And the Blue Jays needing a closer and believing that Jordan Hicks could be that guy with his 100-mile-per-hour fastball sinker. And the DeYoung was obviously the day after Bo went down in the base path. And all I could think of when I saw Bo grabbing his knee is that incident in St. Louis with Moises Alou going around and that gruesome ankle injury, ankle and shin that he suffered in a similar incident, hustling around first base and then stopping in the baseline. But the difference in St. Louis was at Busch Stadium at the time, it was all carpet except for cutouts at the bases. And the fact that Bo was running on dirt, I think, made that less impactful than the one to Alou.
Yeah, thank goodness for it too, because it didn't look good. And it looked very, to me, those types of injuries, Griff, just in my experience watching the sports that I do, like Jimmy Garoppolo, and you're going to laugh because I'm going right back to the 49ers, but Jimmy Garoppolo tore his ACL in week 3 in Kansas City in 2018, scrambling out toward the left sideline. And he took a step out of bounds and essentially nothing happened. And he blew his knee out and was done for the year. He wasn't touched. It wasn't a contact injury. It was just a little sort of sideways jolt to the knee, and the ACL snapped. So my worry for Bo when I first saw it was, this is not good. And then when they went and got Paul DeYoung, it was around that time that they opened up and said, look, there's some patellar tendon inflammation, but we don't think there's anything more. We expect Bo to be back. And I thought, man, that is the best case scenario. But I view Paul DeYoung not as the right-handed bat that we have been saying they needed to acquire. I see him as the stopgap for Bo. So Bo's injury creates a hole that you now have to fill. DeYoung will do that. He obviously is not the player Bo is, but he will fill the hole while Bo is out. If he hits well enough, I'm sure they'll find him some ABs once Bichette is back at shortstop. With Jordan Hicks, arguably the best reliever on the market, although Paul Sewald got traded by the Mariners to the Diamondbacks, and I think Sewald is better.
I'd rather have Hicks than Sewald.
You would? Okay. Yeah. And is that the velocity thing?
It's the velocity thing and not being necessarily relied upon as the closer. I think when Jordan Romano comes back, it's a nice combination. To me, the guy in Minnesota was a perfect example of that. He'd come in and throw 103 miles an hour. Even a guy in Seattle would come in and throw 102 and be
Munoz?
The setup guy. Yeah. So like I saw that as a role, and I saw him as a better fit than Sewald. But yeah, I have no problem with the Hicks acquisition.
Okay, so I'm also okay with it because he was one of the, relatively speaking, upper echelon relievers available. And it's clear to me that they're looking to shorten the game, which is what the playoffs are all about, right? So Ross Atkins can sit there now and look at this and say, and if I omit a name here, Griff, it's by accident, so just keep me in check. But he can sit here and say to himself, we trust Tim Meza, we trust Trevor Richards based on the year that he's having, we trust Jordan Hicks, we trust Jordan Romano, we trust Eric Swanson, and hopefully there are enough arms in that pen now that are trusted that Swanson, they can ease back on him just a little bit because he has pitched fatigued, or at least with the appearance of being fatigued over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and the results have shown that. And Chad Green.
Chad Green. But the thing to me, when you go down that list, is that with the 6-man rotation, and let's say it is only through September 12th, because that's when they get back into the Texas and then the AL East games where they definitely need to trim down the rotation to 5 again and then go with an extra reliever. But in the meantime, Chad Green fits in there, but then you only have a 7-man bullpen because there's 13 pitchers on the team, 6 starters, 7 relievers. And to your point, like, who are your 7 most reliable that if you get into a winning streak, you don't have to overuse Swanson and overuse Romano and those guys. Maybe if Romano closes 2 days in a row, Hicks can pick up the next game and give him a blow. So that's what we're looking at with the bullpen. But
my concern with Hicks, because, and nobody's a perfect player, but my concern with Hicks is that while he throws 102, there are significant periods of time where he has no idea where it's going. Right? That's a fact. And look at his walk totals this year. And I know it's one game and it happened in late March, early April, but he was a tire fire in that opening series against the Blue Jays. That doesn't define him as a pitcher, but it's an example of what I'm talking about.
Right.
He's not locked down. You feel 99% confident that the job's going to get done. There could be some trips to Adventureland when he's on the mound.
But the fact of just averaging over 100 is a good head start for anyone.
Yeah, as long as you have.
And then on Tuesday, his debut with the Blue Jays, I think he can be forgiven. His velocity started out low, and then he got up over 100 consistently. And he did not. His pitching line on Tuesday was not good. But the fact is that it was his first opportunity. I think he had only pitched once in the previous 12 or 13 days. And when he was asked in the dugout about it, he said, just circumstances. There was no situation for me. And who knows whether they thought the Cardinals thought they were going to trade him, so they didn't want to use him. But
right. And I'm not holding Tuesday's Blue Jays debut against Hicks. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about you can look at his baseball reference page and get a sense for where some of the holes are in his game. There's no question he can fire it. The thing with velocity, Griff, is you've got to have the offset, right? And you've got to be able to locate the offset, because everybody and their uncle in this day and age can hit 100, can hit 101, can hit 102, because they've seen it forever. And some of these young players, I've told this story before, I'll repeat it now. Spring training 2019, the Blue Jays are about to take a bus trip over to Tampa to play the Yankees. And on that day, Aroldis Chapman was going to pitch the first inning for New York. And I walk up to Bo Bichette, who had not yet made his major league debut and was a 20-year-old at the time. And I asked him, so how do you prepare for triple digits? And he just looked at me kind of confused. I don't know. I've been seeing 100 since I was 16. So, velocity is lovely, but you have to pitch, because we're not in the Aroldis Chapman as a rookie, or going back further, Billy Wagner is really the only guy who throws 100 era. A lot of guys do that now, right? Nate Pearson's a perfect example. Even if he's not hitting 100 lately, you have to have more than velocity to guarantee success.
What the Jays use, and sometimes I think they overuse, is those two magic words, Pete Walker.
Right.
People could give credit to Genesis Cabrera coming over and all of a sudden being able to throw strikes, when his history in St. Louis was not being able to throw strikes, throwing hard, whatever. I think he's 97, 98. He has been here already. But the Jays use that as a magic formula. Is he'll work with Pete Walker and he'll figure things out. I'm talking about Jordan Hicks in this situation, but it'll be interesting to see. And it's a nice acquisition in terms of lengthening the bullpen, which to me was exposed on that trip to Seattle and Dodger Stadium, because they got into situations where you knew you weren't going to see Mitch White. The only time he came in was to lose the game when there were nobody left in the bullpen at Dodger Stadium. So it lengthens the bullpen. It allows for John Schneider to be able to rest some of his key relievers and not worry about somebody having to overperform to get through a game. So I think that and Cabrera were a couple of good ads at the deadline, but they didn't get that right-handed power bat that they were.
Right. Well, they remain convinced, Griff. And look, time doesn't stop for anyone. They remain convinced Or maybe they are trying to convince themselves because the price points for what they could have acquired were too high, or some of those available were people they didn't want to bring into the clubhouse. Whatever the case may be, they are trying to convince themselves that this lineup is good enough. And theoretically and on paper, it is. But as we sit here on Wednesday morning, August the 2nd, the bottom of the 6th inning of the Tuesday night, August the 1st game against Baltimore, which was last night as we sit here, was a prime example of,
I got it.
This team makes you believe. They get on a 7 out of 10 run, and people start to say, well, they're coming around. And then it's right back to some nondescript, middling to less than average stretch. And look, they're right back in the American League East. Brandon Belt, if you didn't watch Tuesday night, August 1st game, you'd see that Brandon Belt in the box score hit a double. And in your mind, it's just as likely to have been a laser rope that one hops the wall as it was what it actually was, which was a floater to the vacated third base position as the O's were in a bit of a shift. And there's Brandon Belt standing on second base with the Blue Jays down a run, with Vladdy, Springer, and Chapman coming up. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hits a lousy, lazy, shitty fly ball on the first pitch to right field, and Belt doesn't advance. And George Springer, who is in a real crater right now, doesn't get the job done. He's 0 for his last 1,000,000. And Matt Chapman, who, look at my lovely flow here if you're watching on YouTube. Amazingly, because he makes me want to pull my hair out half the time, I've managed to not do that. Swings through a high fastball for strike 3, and it's inning over. And then the Orioles come out in the top of the 7th inning and light the tits off of Genesis
Cabrera. Wait a sec. Okay, now you've detailed the bottom of the 6th. Let's go to the top of the 7th. And Cabrera coming in, and he hasn't had a bad outing until this one here, if you're going to look at it like that. But there's a one hopper to the backhand of Matt Chapman, the first batter, Mateo, and that should have been an out. There's 99 out of 100 times Chapman makes that play. So
and then he makes a brilliant play. And then he makes a brilliant play later in the game when the game's out of hand.
Yeah, when the game's out of hand, and a lot of and then of course Rutschman flies out, so that would have been 2 outs. And then Mountcastle, they can't get Mountcastle out. I remember chasing a his first career home run ball in Buffalo. I had to walk across the turnpike because he had hit it so far, and he hasn't stopped hitting against the Blue Jays since that moment. We did come up with the ball, and this is before my hip surgery, so I look like a homeless guy wandering out there looking for a handout. But yeah, that the rest of that
picturing
inning,
you crossing a highway.
Yeah, the rest of that inning sort of unfolded in a sort of a debacle for Cabrera.
But I'm not here to crap on Cabrera, Griff. I'm just juxtaposing.
But you're saying if you were just looking at the box score, so I'm adding if you were just looking at the box score for Cabrera.
Absolutely. But I'm fixated on the bottom of the 6th.
Yeah.
And I'm not asking Vladdy to hit a 2-run home run in that situation, because home runs, you can hit 50 home runs in a season in 640 or 650 plate appearances. I mean, that's how often home runs happen for the very best home run hitters.
Yeah.
Right. So nobody sits there and expects a home run to be hit. But goodness gracious, you cannot. What's the plan?
But the other thing about
what's the plan? Yeah, when you're stepping into the batter's box.
How unfortunate for Ross Atkins that the day of the trade deadline, he's got George Springer in the middle of an 0 for 34 slump. So when you say we need a right-handed bat the fans are looking at a right-handed bat because their prized possession, their trinket that still has a few more years to go on a multi-million-dollar contract is 0 for 34.
Right. Right. And other teams know the desperation. And so, oh, you want Teoscar Hernandez from us, say the Mariners? Okay, well, this is what it's going to cost. Well, we can't go there. Okay, no deal.
I think the reverse, or the repatriation of Teoscar to the Blue Jays, would have cost more in equivalency than Eric Swanson. So they would have been getting like 2 months of Teoscar for nothing, basically.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing with Springer, Griff. And correct me if you think I'm off on some tangent. When you sign a guy who's right around 30 years old to a long-term contract for massive, massive money, you are doing so with the anticipation that the early years of that contract are going to pay off twofold. One, in personal success for the player, because I think it's inarguable. Now, George Springer could be an outlier and prove me wrong, and I'll be happy to shut up. But you are a better player because your body is younger at 30, 31, 32 than you are at 33, 34, 35. And secondly, in team success, because you're not signing George Springer to a 6-year contract in the middle of his career as he approaches the back nine with the thought of him being a top-end contributor to your really good team 5 or 6 years down the road. If that happens, great. But that's not what the plan is at the time. And 6 and 150 is what it took to get George to Toronto. It might have taken one less year and 25 fewer $1 million to get him to go somewhere else. So if that's the Toronto overpay, that's fine. Nobody's arguing that. But again, we're not even at the halfway point of this contract, and there hasn't been a team playoff game victory. And George Springer is in a horrible slump right now. I'm not writing his career off, but his best days surely are not ahead of him. The actuarial table tells me that, right? He's getting older.
Further to your point one, 6 years and 150, you're not paying for his 6 years in Houston. If you're the Astros and you give a guy after his 5th year, you extend him for 6 years and 150, you're rewarding him for what he's already done for your team. George Springer had done nothing for the Blue Jays yet. So the 6 and 150 is clearly for the next 6 years, and clearly because they believe, as you said, that they're going to contend not in 2026, but immediately. And he has had a couple of unfortunate injuries that cost him a lot of time, and to have those injuries caught up with his body, we don't know. But it is very worrisome that he seems so lost at the plate, and his body language in the dugout and in the clubhouse is like he's whistling past a graveyard. You know, I mean, it's not the same George Springer as you see at spring training when nothing has happened, when everything is good, when the season lies ahead of him and the team. And that's not the same George Springer we're seeing every day now.
No. And so, I mean, they can sit here. Well, they have to now, Griff, because the trade deadline's passed. They can sit here and convince themselves that this offensive lineup is good enough to get the job done. And I will repeat what I have said in recent weeks, which is, I mean, they're screwed without Bo Bichette. They need Bichette back ASAP. Obviously, they can't rush him. That is a new and unfortunate wrinkle in this entire conversation. But setting the Bichette situation aside for a moment, a lot of the holes get covered if Vladimir Guerrero Jr. comes up in situations, in tight ball games, in the middle to late portions of ball games, and comes through. And it's just not happening. Not happening enough. It has happened, but not enough. And so I return to the bottom of the 6th inning as an example last night, where at the very least, They needed him to get Brandon Belt to third base with Belt on second and nobody out. At the very least, make it a productive out. It wasn't. And so papering over some of these offensive holes that they have, if your top stars aren't going to do it, this becomes a thin lineup really quickly.
Yeah,
really quickly.
Someone that I know, a source from inside the clubhouse, suggested that Bo would be a minimum 3 weeks, which would explain why you go out and you know, if you have 3 or 4 choices for a right-handed bat and then Bo goes down, your 3 or 4 choices become Paul DeJong. I mean, that's the only solution. If you've got one deal to make and Bo is going to be out for just under a month, and that's just an estimate, then you got to get that guy. And he's got 13 or 14 home runs this year, but his batting average and his on base are sort of down. He had a couple of great years starting out his career, but you had to make that deal. And Teoscar, we discussed already, and who knows who else was available, but you didn't see a lot of right-handed bats being thrown around baseball to new teams. So that, what you said earlier, the point you made earlier about the Blue Jays front office having to believe, or having the belief, that this lineup is better than it showed, has to be the underlying factor to not going out and sort of, because to me, second base and left field, Merrifield can play one. You could have got somebody for either of those positions. DH and center field. I don't think anyone thinks Kevin Kiermaier is the bottom line starting center fielder on a team that wants to win a championship. He's had a great year for Kevin Kiermaier at his age. He plays the game hard. He plays the game right. But you could have made an improvement out there. So there's like 4 positions. DH we've talked about. Well, we really haven't, because Brandon Belt seems to be their solution. And Brandon Belt yesterday on Tuesday was batting second. How do you have a guy who can't run batting second? I mean, to me, with Bo out, you got to have Merrifield, Vlad, and then build after that.
Yeah, and I come back to, Griff, to the entirety of the lack of plate discipline. And it's just, I mean, Kyle Bradish could be had Tuesday night, and that's the most recent example. But just the unwillingness to take a walk so often. Well, that's the personality of a lot of these hitters. Okay, I don't know. I don't know, man. Like, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was sold as a guy who hit the baseball as hard or harder than anybody else coming up, with an eye that was very different than his father's. And we saw examples of that. And the unwillingness, and typically if a team is struggling offensively, I understand the mindset of individuals becomes, I've got to be the hero. I've got to get the job done. You know, I'm in control of the situation right now while I'm standing in the batter's box, and don't feel that I can count on the next guy. And then the next guy comes up thinking the same thing, and it just becomes a train.
I think that I have never seen a stretch of baseball where you look up and a Blue Jays hitter is at 0-2 or 1-2 in the count. And that's not going to be a situation. If these guys don't like hitting with 2 strikes and it's in their head that they're not performing, 0-2, 1-2 is you're going to get the results you're getting, you know. Bo is, you know, they make a lot about Bo's hitting with 2 strikes, but he does have a different approach, and he does foul pitches off. But I don't see a lot of opposing starting pitchers or relievers being scared to throw strikes early in the count. So they're not getting into hitters' counts, they're getting into pitchers' counts, and they're defending. And this is the result that we're seeing, you know. And just as an extra aside, in terms of hitting the ball hard, Chapman in all of Major League Baseball ranks 6th in exit velocity, average exit velocity, and Vlad is 8th. And then after that, you know, you got Bo, like 56, mid 50s or something, and then everyone else falls off a cliff. So, Chapman and Vlad are still hitting the ball hard, but just the results in big situations are not showing up. They're not there.
Yeah, they're not getting the job done with runners in scoring position. And the 2 outs runners in scoring position statistic, the air quotes clutch statistic, I think that can move year over year. Right. I mean,
Vlad's is pretty good right now.
Right.
But nobody can remember any of them.
Well, yeah. I mean, he had that. God, all these games bleed together, but they were down a couple of runs, bottom of the ninth, 2 out, and he had that base hit to right field. Runner on third scored to make it 7-6, and then Bo was out by a mile and a half at home. This is probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Like, that's a clutch hit, right? But the tying run doesn't score, they lose the game, and you forget about it.
It must be pointed out also, I think it was Monday's game where the umpire, I forget who it was, but 299-mile-an-hour Bautista fastballs
way off,
cinches off the plate, and they're called strike 3. There's no defense for that for a hitter. You can't put a swing on that. You're not expected to swing at balls outside the zone. You get criticized if you do. And then the umpire calls one and takes you out of the game, takes you out of the batter's box. And so, that seems to happen more to the Jays than to other teams, but that's because we watch them play every day. But I'm beginning to turn a little bit towards the robo ump, but I never thought I would say that.
Let's just mark the date down.
I said August. A little bit. I said a little bit. I'm not like 100%.
Yeah, but Griff, nobody just with the snap of a finger changes an opinion. They have to feel it. They have to think about it. Your train has left the station.
As a 20-year coach of amateur baseball, I love that interaction of leaving the dugout to argue with an umpire, and I'm not going to argue with a robot. I'm sorry.
Right, you're pissed. That I knew. See, I knew it. I was going to even call you out on that before you admitted it. You're pissed at the potential lost opportunities for a little rant and rave session, which I'm sure a lot of big league managers are. Could you imagine Earl Weaver in this day and age? Lou Piniella? I can't go out and yell at you about calling my base stealer out at second on a close play. I can't, like, how many times did Lou Piniella go grab a base and hurl it into the outfield? Right?
Yeah, there's a kid that was an umpire when I was coaching in Oakville all those years. His name was Chris Marco, and he is now at AA or AAA. I lost track. He was in the Texas League one year, and he had ejected me once or twice. And so my thing with John Schneider is, and Schneider remembers him from games that he had worked with them. And I said, I just can't wait till he comes up and throws you out of a game, and then we'll have something really in common. Been thrown out by the same umpire. It'd be great. But you can't do that with a robo ump like the Jetsons. Like the little maid in the Jetsons. I'm turning back around. You've marked the date down, but I've talked myself out of it. I hate robo ump.
All right, so I like the Jetsons reference. So you're 1/3 of the way to your quota. We need a Flintstones reference and a Beverly Hillbillies reference before this show is over.
Yeah, I remember the cement pond at Jerry Park and Willie McCovey depositing balls in a. Is that a good Beverly Hillbillies reference?
The cement.
Was that a pond? That's their swimming pool.
Okay.
That's what they call
I was going to say the swimming pool over the right field fence was called the what pond?
No, I'm talking about the Beverly Hillbillies, what they called.
Oh, okay.
In French, it was the piscine.
Yeah.
The piscine au champ.
Right. Drink enough water and you have to. It's funny as we sit here and talk about the Blue Jays and the trade deadline and all that. You go to New York City, Griff. Joel Sherman wrote a piece in the New York Post, and I was watching MLB Network a lot on Tuesday, trade deadline day, and Joel was all over that. In fact, he was sitting with Steve Phillips, our good friend, and they were part of the crew doing deadline day at MLB Network. But he wrote a piece in the Post eviscerating the Yankees, who acquired a couple of relievers who are famous only in their own homes, and like would arguably be 7th or 8th relief arms for the Yankees, and that their deadline inaction is the result of a number of bad decisions. And Joel chronicled them. I encourage you to go read the piece if you haven't, but Joel chronicled all of the decisions that they have made in recent years that have led to what he called a failed deadline day for the Yanks. And then you go over to Queens, where the New York Mets entered the season with a $343 million payroll. Their owner, Steve Cohen, is the richest person in the sport and is paying like $100 million into the luxury tax this year because they're so far over the threshold. And they begin to divest, and Max Scherzer goes to Texas and is quoted after as saying, yeah, well, I was told there are no plans to contend in 2024. You know, obviously Verlander went back to Houston, but now you got this veteran manager, Buck Showalter. It's been a bad year for the Mets. Why the hell is he going to want to stick around next year if they are, quote, rebuilding? I don't even know if that's the appropriate word for whatever it is they might or might not do in 2024. But Scherzer decided, yeah, I don't want to be here for this, and waived his no trade and is now a Texas Ranger.
Yeah, I can't ever remember a trade deadline day when at the end of it you go that the two New York teams weren't, either one wasn't a buyer or both weren't buyers. In this case, the Mets clearly were a seller, and the Yankees were stuck in neutral. I don't know what they were doing, and Joel Sherman obviously doesn't either. But the Mets, you know, they had two $43 million pitchers, and they got rid of them and are paying the rest, I believe, are paying the rest of their contracts for this year, for this season.
Right.
So, like, Steve Cohen has so much money that he doesn't seem to care. But the guy that should be taking some of this is Buck Showalter. Like, how can Buck Showalter get away with not being blamed for some of this debacle? His reputation was as being able to handle championship caliber teams, although every team that he left went on the next year to win the World Series. He did that.
Yankees, the Diamondbacks.
Texas went to the playoffs after he had left them. But so like he's just cruising through this. It's like I can't see Bruce Bochy, the same thing happening with him, or Joe Madden. Joe Madden's a genius. I don't see that happening with him.
You just want to see the look on my face. If you're watching us on YouTube, youtube.com/exit philosophy, the genius.
Yeah.
Game 7 of the 2016 World Series. Griff, all you have to do is say it, and I'm going to go. So, look, you were making a point, and here I am interrupting you because I can't get. But yes, I totally take your point. It's like, man, have they underachieved.
New York media seems to be forgiving or understanding of the Mets situation and not the Yankees. The Mets situation they're talking about, yeah, they're doing the right thing. They're getting rid of players. They're not going to win this year. And you're saying that Scherzer went and he said he was told they weren't going to win next year too. I don't know. It's like the Blue Jays. And we've discussed it before. They cannot go into a rebuild mode with all the money they're sinking into the new stadium. You know, with all the money and all the expectations of the high rollers coming to watch Blue Jays games and entertain clients at the private dining clubs, they're not all real baseball fans. They're business people. and they need to be entertained. Are you not entertained?
Am I not entertained? No, I'm thinking about, and on the Yankees side, I'm thinking about Josh Donaldson, right? And his decline started last year. But
Yeah.
isn't it interesting? Couple of former Blue Jays in the post-steroid era. Jose Bautista was a shell of himself by his own standards that he set in his final year in Toronto in 2017. And he's a 1980 baby. Believe he was born in October. So that's age 36 going on 37. And then he bounced around the National League East the next year and didn't really have anything to show for it before he, I guess, was forced into retirement. Josh Donaldson, I can't remember the month he was born, but he's 1985. I think he's later in the year, so he'd be 37 right now. So age 36 last year, age 37 this year, a bunch of injuries in his history. He's fallen off a cliff. I think those are two prime examples of guys who were greats, legitimate greats in their primes, who remind us that when you get on the other side of 35, it's completely and totally negotiable, which is taking me back to our George Springer conversation and why the first part of his contract, and we're nearing the end of the third year of the 6-year deal, is so crucial, both for personal success for him and team success that his personal success is supposed to be contributing to.
Yeah, and he's 33 now. So, but he's had, as we detailed, he's had a couple of significant injuries in his time with the Blue Jays, and he bounced back, and he performed well, and his leadoff home run total is well documented, passing Craig Biggio. And so, like, at 33, he's got 3 or 4 more years, but that's the length of his contract. And to see him fall off like this, and there's 2 months left in the season, if he gets on a roll and if hitting is 70 or 80% in your head, then, he's still got a chance to salvage the season. And the Blue Jays might look smart for not getting that significant right-handed bat at the deadline. It may become incidental. They may make the playoffs, and who knows what's going to happen at that point.
Yeah, and again, when I say this, I acknowledge that the Philadelphia Phillies last year went to the World Series. They got hot at the right time. They've got a bunch of really good ball players. As was described last year, they got a bunch of designated hitters playing all over the field, whether it's Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, list goes on and on. Pretty good starting pitching staff, which the Blue Jays have as well. They went to the World Series. Anything is possible, but I do not see, Griff, I do not see the 2023 Toronto Blue Jays as a World Series winner. I don't.
They said that about the Phillies didn't win the World Series, but at this time last year, they were saying that about the Phillies.
I agree. And that's why I brought them up.
Yeah.
It's just, but it's a reminder. It's a reminder, and Shai Davidi says this more now than ever before, but it's a reminder that 162 games is in its own way the true test of your mettle as a team. The tournament at the end of the year, which is what they all play for. So I don't discount it. I don't care if you win 110 games. If you don't win the World Series, nobody's talking about you. The point is to hoist the piece of metal, right? The piece of metal, as Rob Manfred, the great commissioner, calls it. But 162 shows you who you are. If you can get hot for 3.5 weeks in October, early November, you can make even more out of your season if you get there than you were anticipating. So I grant them that. I just don't see them as a World Series contender.
I mean, I could lead the Boston Marathon after 1 mile, but the Kenyans are still going to end up winning it. So, like, there's that.
Yeah, but Griff, there's that keg. It's almost a mirage, but there's that keg off in the distance. And if you just keep pursuing,
well,
if you see that keg, and it's always like 300 feet ahead, no matter how much progress you make.
The only thing that
I
would
just-
stop me is Kramer handing me a hot coffee at the as I run by.
Yeah, exactly. Or
Well,
Kramer sidling up to you at the bar. Yeah, I'm hip. What are you talking about? Oh, to the bathroom scene. No offense. When you come back, or when I come back, I'm sitting over there. We're getting into our Seinfeld references. Griff's Riffs, and I was thinking of another potential title for Griff's Riffs, Griff, which is the Immaculate Griff. Right? We've got the Immaculate Grid game, which I am completely obsessed with. By the way, are you playing this thing every day?
I just found out about it when my son Pat asked me a couple of questions. I said, "What is this?" And then since then, I've been looking at it. And the great thing for me is that there's no deadline. It doesn't give you like 5 minutes to do it or something. You know?
Yeah, the deadline is midnight Eastern time.
But I mean, there's no like you got to sit down and do it. You can just look at it and then spend the rest of the day thinking about it, and go back into it when you come up with an answer, because my short-term memory isn't what it used to.
My soul dies anytime I see the Colorado Rockies, Pittsburgh Pirates come up. I just, unless I can match Willie Stargell to something, and Stargell was before my time, or like Bonds, Bonilla. I was proud of myself when I put Pittsburgh, Kansas City, row column, Jose leaned. I was proud of myself for that one. But when I see the Pirates or Rockies come up, I realize, holy shit, if it isn't Galarraga, Dante Bichette, Larry Walker era Colorado Rockies, which was like just a few years after they came into existence, I'm completely lost with that team.
My best was the Twins and the Nationals, which I guess includes the Expos. So my answer was Al Newman.
Al Newman, yes.
It was
my proudest
0.0002%.
Oh, you got 2 zeros after the decimal.
Oh yeah.
I got 0.03, so 0.03% for a Chicago Cubs Philadelphia Phillies match. Right-handed pitcher Amori Telemaco.
Oh my God.
From the mid to late 90s.
Maybe you were the only one who came up with that.
Right. So I was, again, the only loser out there, while everybody else was picking Kyle Schwarber or Ryan Sandberg.
Right. I mean, that's a key. There's some obvious ones, but you don't want to pick them because you don't score as much.
I'm going for the rarity score.
Right.
Man. I'm going the ones that I've learned. Ernie Banks did not have 3,000 career hits. It took me a failed grid to learn that, which, was stupid. So I should have known that.
We had Ross Atkins with the obvious one of Teoscar Hernandez, but he says, I'm going to go get Paul DeJong.
Right. I'm going to chase. Years after trading Chase DeJong, I'm going to chase Paul DeJong.
Yeah.
I don't know. I swear to you, I didn't have that one in my holster for the last 45 minutes trying to fit it in. It just came to my head, and maybe I shouldn't have said it to begin with. But take us back, Griff's Riffs, or the Immaculate Griff, whatever you want to call it, to the 2019 trade deadline. Now, keep in mind, that's Charlie Montoyo's first season managing the Blue Jays. It was a 67-win, 95-loss season when it was all said and done.
Yeah, and it was a terrible year on the field. And it was a year in which, it's the last year that the Jays have been sellers. Since then, 20, and there's and griffstopitch.com, there's a document that lists all of the trades since 2020, since they became relevant again in pennant races. But in 2019, they weren't relevant. It was in Kansas City. The team was playing a day game in Kansas City, and the deadline was during the game. The trade deadline was during the game. And there were 4 or 5 media people, and I was the only PR person on the road with the Blue Jays at that point. And all hell started to break loose because Ken Giles was on the docket. Ken Giles had flown to Houston to see a doctor the day before. Nicky Hoffman had to have a press conference because the media didn't know that he had flown down. I think it was just to check him out in terms of being traded that day because there's medicals involved, and he had been on the DL, which it was called at that time, I think. And so he flew back in. Daniel Hudson was traded during the game, and I was in the clubhouse, and the media was all upstairs. And Hudson's dad was there, and he was traded, I forget, Cubs maybe, and they were playing in St. Louis. So his dad was going to drive him right away from Kansas City to St. Louis.
Well, he traded to Washington, wasn't he?
And they were playing in Chicago at the time.
Okay, yeah.
So he was getting in the car, so I had to call the media down. They came downstairs. Outside, there's a lobby area outside the clubhouse. And so Hudson did his press conference, was very gracious, and then left the ballpark. They went back, the media went back upstairs. And then at the end of the game, Aaron Sanchez was traded, Joe Biagini was traded, Ken Giles was on the block, and the Blue Jays and Ross Atkins were in Charlie's office waiting for a call from the Yankees because there was a great deal on the table with the Yankees for 3 of their top prospects. And then just at the last second, that deal fell apart. The Yankees pulled it off the table, and Giles stayed with the Jays, even though everyone thought he was going to be traded at the deadline. And so he ended up staying there, and the Yankees' 3 top prospects stayed with the Yankees. But at the same time, Sean Reed Foley had started the game, and it was a small clubhouse, and there was the Blue Jays backdrop where the starting pitcher usually came out, and the media was going around. They were seeing guys packing their lockers, Sanchez and Biagini, and there were others. And like, it was crazy, but I loved it. I love the chaos. I love the chaos of any situation where you can just wade through and pull guys out and explain things. And the only guy who didn't get it was Sean Reed Foley, who couldn't understand why nobody wanted to talk to him about his fabulous 3-inning performance against the Royals. But that was the first deadline back as a PR person. I had done that obviously for 20 years in Montreal, but that's my favorite trade deadline in probably in the last 20 years, because it was so chaotic, so full of action, and like the deadline just made no sense because it happened in the middle of a game. And that was Bo's first series with the Blue Jays playing shortstop, and he got his first hit the day before, or that day. The next time we went to Kansas City, I said, Bo, remember, this is where you made your debut. There's going to be a lot of questions. Sportsnet is going to have questions. Everybody's going to have questions about what do you remember? Yeah, I got it. And so Sportsnet, Hazel or whoever it was, took him aside and said, so, Bo, you're back in Kansas City where you made your debut. What are your thoughts? Yeah, nothing special. And he turned and walked away. Yeah, guys today, kids today, let's have a little drama here. That's what we're here for. But that sounds like Bo. Yeah, I've been seeing 100 miles an hour since I was 16.
Yeah, exactly. What do you want from me?
It's the same Bo. It's the same Bo.
No, I'm not going to make shit up to serve your narrative.
I could have written him some really good shit to serve the narrative.
Yeah, exactly. And how about Brian Cashman stiffing Ross Atkins? My view on that whole Ken Giles thing, the way you describe it, I'm 100% on Atkins' side there. If I were Ross Atkins, I would be loath to do business with Brian Cashman ever again.
I'd be interested to
see
how many deals since 2019 the two teams have made. That would be
it's not typical that you would, because they're a division rival and stuff, but
Brandon Drury in that mix?
Brandon Drury. If you go back in history,
Jesse
Barfield for Al Leiter.
That's going back before the Giles Atkins debacle.
Yeah, no, but I'm thinking about I'm thinking about all the deals that they've made, like David Cohn for Marty Jansen and two other guys that
Yeah.
I can't remember. I hardly remember Marty Jansen.
Did you say
That was
lighter?
Yeah, lighter for Barfield in '89.
Right.
Yeah. It just doesn't happen a lot, but I would be loath to do business with that guy ever again after he stiffed me like that.
Well,
Screw you.
now the question is, how long can Brian Cashman last in that job? You know,
Well, he's only been doing it for a quarter century, Griff.
yeah, I remember him.
maybe it's time.
I remember him as a rookie GM, and I think he took over from Bob Watson, maybe, and it was the '98 World Series, and he was like in the booth, and I was covering, and he was like just soaking it all in as a kid. And he'd be up in the box, and the TV cameras would be on him singing his praises. But he had inherited a lot of great teams, and that may have been the greatest Yankee team in 1998 when they won 100 and whatever 24 games or whatever it was, including playoffs. But he's been there since then, and 2001 they lost to the Diamondbacks, and then after that 2009 is the only world championship that they won with that huge payroll and with the demand of the Steinbrenner family. And like, how can he still be there 22 years later? That's why I'm thinking that maybe this is it for him,
Griff, he wouldn't still be there if George was alive.
Oh,
right.
God.
I'm not talking about Costanza. I'm talking about Big Stein.
Yeah,
right?
God, no. Yeah.
George Steinbrenner would have moved on, probably, and maybe even Brian Cashman would have been like, I don't need this anymore after a while, right? It would have exhausted him too.
But this might be the last straw in terms of a team that was expected to do more, and nobody saw the crumbling of the structure of the infrastructure. And here they are at the deadline, and they don't do anything. That's crazy.
So as we put a wrap on episode 13 of Exit Philosophy, I'm going to ask you this question. I'm going to put you on the spot because you could still end up being right. And God knows the Jays could, as we sit here on Wednesday morning, August the 2nd, come back and split this 4-game set with Baltimore. Although the Jays' record in the American League East this year suggests otherwise. Do you stand by what you said last week about the Blue Jays ultimately winning the AL East now that we have the trade deadline in the rearview mirror? I'm standing by my Orioles prediction, and obviously I'm feeling good about it, but I know things can change in an 8-week period.
Yeah, I was breaking it down. This was the 2/3 mark of the season, 54, and then there's 54 games left. They were 28-26 in the first 54, 31-23 in the second third of the season. And so if they went 31-23 again, they would win 90 games. And they didn't play that well going 31-23 in the second third of the season. There were a lot of gaps, there were a lot of holes, there were a lot of blown situations. So say they win 35 games, that would give them 94 for the year. And in this such a competitive division, I could see 94, 95 winning the division. And so I still believe that the Orioles pitching will be running on fumes in September, especially the bullpen, those guys and the starters who are all reaching towards their innings pitched career highs. And I see the Rays, their bubble having burst. You can only carry on with what they've done for 8 years. You can only do that for so long before things start to fall apart for you. And so I'm sticking by it. What do you think about that?
I'm happy because we're obviously going to revisit this each and every week from now on, and I'm glad you are. Yeah, I'm glad you are confident that the Blue Jays offense, which has not done its thing for more than 3 months now, will find a way to do its thing at some point in the next 2.
So 35-19 would give them 94 wins. I'll say that. I'll say 35-19, 94 wins, and we'll see. We'll roll the dice and see where that ends up.
All right. So Another show for the birds. I'm sticking by my Orioles prediction. I said the Jays will make the playoffs as a wild card team. Griff is sticking by his call that the Jays are ultimately going to win the AL East. And wouldn't that be a thing? Because if they win the AL East, they will do so with not a very good record in the division, or they're going to pile up wins against the Yankees and Rays in the last couple of weeks of the season. They've still got a trip to Baltimore before it's over, all that.
Yeah, that would have to be the case down the stretch, the final 12 or 15 games, intra-division. They would have to really turn it on at that point. But, you know, when you're playing other teams that don't have a six-man rotation and as deep a bullpen, who knows?
Yeah. Well, we'll see if the Jays have a six-man rotation over the next few weeks. They need Alek Manoah to just continue to get them into the fifth and the sixth. Doesn't have to be sexy, but you've got to give your team a chance to win. Yeah, and Ryu was fine last night. Yeah. I'm not going to say it was good. It certainly wasn't bad. It was fine for what it was.
That's a wrap. That's a good hitting team too. That's a good hitting team. They're legit. I just worry about their pitching, but
that's the team. That's the team with the best record in the American League. Yeah. I'm not going to call them my Baltimore Orioles because I'll get run the hell off a Blue Jays focused podcast. But the team I predicted as the best record in the American League. That's a wrap for episode 13 of the Exit Philosophy podcast. Griff's in Oakville. I'm in Bedford, Nova Scotia, and we plan to get back on track. There will be no like Monday or Tuesday things on the baseball schedule next week. So we intend to record again this coming Monday, which is the holiday Monday, the 7th. Look forward to talking to you then. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Scotty. Thanks, everyone.